having this opportunity. I want to begin with the blessing. So let's open it. And you can see it here in front of you. It's important to acknowledge the blessings in our lives and the opportunity to learn, to think, to grow is what comes out of Torah study, and hopefully gives us something personal to connect with, which is, as I've said in the past, that's an important part of learning. And I have to click something. Hold on. There we go. Because now it'll go to the website. It's really important to acknowledge the gifts and the blessings that we do have. And this blessing for Torah, as I've said, is really about the immersion into Torah study. We always come away with something, hopefully, something new, a new spark, a new approach, a new understanding. So this is what we're going to do first, and then we're going to jump right in. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok, to soak up b'divrei Torah, b'divrei, with the words of Torah. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And as you know, I'm an artist. So it's one of the things I love is visuals. And I have brought today the topic that we're going to look at is something that you're very familiar with. You're living with it right at this moment. It's called Shabbat. And so before we start, I have a question, and that is for each of you to just take a moment. What does Shabbat mean to you? We know it begins at sundown Friday and it ends tonight at sundown. And all of us find our way into creating meaning and purpose around it and connection to it. But for each one of you, when you think about Torah, I mean Shabbat, and Torah is a big part of Shabbat, can you tell me, what does Shabbat mean to you? So, Eric, I think you had your hand up. Oh, you have to unmute when you speak. Sorry.
Oh, Shabbat is a time to reflect on the week that happens because I'm autistic. I gotta have my me time to sort out everything. Like in the morning, I like to do my paperwork while I'm still fresh and I'm able to organize the day properly in the week when I have peace and quiet. So it's an opportunity to organize your thoughts and reflect on what's happening so you don't get too famished.
Too famished, yes. Good Yiddish word. Yes, reflecting is really a wonderful thing to do. People who, like me, who have spiritual practice of meditation or mindfulness will find every day a couple of moments, a few seconds, moments, as much time as we can to kind of do that for ourselves. But most people during the week don't give themselves that opportunity. So Shabbat is a time to just reflect. Somebody else, Merle, did I see you unmute?
It's just a time that my family spends together and just do quiet things. I mean, we're not out shopping. My husband's not working. My son-in-law may have to work, but that's what it is. But it's just a time to be together, to do whatever it is we do.
It's wonderful that you actually get together, that you make that a priority. Not all families do that. That's beautiful.
It's hard, but we make it work.
That's fabulous. Wow. So reflection, being with the people we love. What else? Rebecca.
I try to not be too busy.
Nice, nice. The 6 days of the week are busy times.
Mm-hmm.
They are. Yeah. Anybody else have what Shabbat means for you? Anybody else? Besides the Torah, oh yes, Suzanne, please. You have to unmute. I know it's you have to unmute, Suzanne. Can you hear me? You need to click on the microphone because we can't hear you. We can't hear you. Just the little click on the little microphone.
Hello? Yes.
Okay. Am I okay?
Now you are, yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, everybody.
No problem.
Okay, so I
Shabbat.
you didn't get the message.
Howard,
check with
I
your
think
dispatch.
Howard
You'll see
needs to
that
actually,
you're delivering a lawsuit, right?
anybody who's not muted needs to mute. It is such a problem not being in a room together, but you can see what happens if you don't. Suzanne, Shabbat, what does it mean for you?
Well, first of all, the best thing that's happened to me is that Torah study starts my Shabbat out. It starts me out recognizing that this isn't just another day. This is a day that no matter what, if my house isn't clean, if my dishes aren't done or whatever, it's like, hey, slow down, just slow down. And that's very important to me because I am a very hyper person. I mean, I have to keep busy every minute. It's not,
Yeah,
Taurus in the last few years has really helped me recognize how special it is to have this day and not feel guilty about not doing something constructive, because I am doing something constructive. It's for me.
Yeah, you know, that the perception of what constructive really means, because what you're doing, if we can give you another word, because constructive does make us feel we're busy, we're active, we're doing something. You're nurturing yourself. You know, you're replenishing, you know, when you stop, when you all talk about slowing down, reflecting, and not being busy, you're actually doing something really important. You're nurturing and nourishing your soul. That's the part of us that we often neglect, you know, during the week, because physically we're active and our minds have things, you know, guide us into doing things, remembering our obligations and taking care of responsibility. But the soul needs to be fed. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you to, again, so Suzanne, if you would mute for a moment, I want to share with you, I want to look at Shabbat, how it comes to be, and track it a little bit so you have a real sense of how the Torah teaches us about Shabbat. So let me just set this up. And once I do, we'll come back later for questions and discussion. I want to present to you a little bit of tracking in Torah about how Shabbat comes to be and how we are actually taught about it, because it happens in a number of places. And it happens before we Yitro. So Yitro is when we receive the commandments. And it's a beautiful parsha. And there are so many things to talk about. What I want to focus on today is Shabbat and how it comes to be and how we're taught about it. And of course, it all begins in the beginning of Torah. And every Friday night, because remember, Shabbat doesn't begin this morning with Torah study. It begins Friday night when the sun goes down and we light the candles. and we have a Shabbat dinner, or we do whatever it is that feels different from the rest of the week. But one of the things we chant before we do the Kiddush, the Kiddush that we do on Friday evenings is actually longer than the one that we do Saturday during the day. Because this is part of what we read. And this is what introduces the Kiddush. Vayuchulu hashemayim v'haaretz v'chol tzva'am vayichal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa vayivarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i vayikadesh oto kivo shavat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim la'asot. This is Genesis chapter 2. God has created 6 days, and then we come to the 7th, which is this beautiful day that we have. And it says in the Torah that the heaven and the earth were finished, and all that was with them, the array, everything with them. And on the 7th day, God finished the work that God had been undertaken. God ceased on the 7th day from doing any of the work. I wanted to show you a word. So Hashvi'i, you hear that a lot, Hashvi'i, the 7th. So from all of his work, which he did. And then it says, and God blessed the 7th day, declared it holy, having ceased on it from all the work of creation that God had done. So there is a work here, and let's see. So Baruch Vayivarech Elohim. So God blesses at the 7th day, and it becomes Vayikadesh. Vayikadesh. Holy. So the word kadosh means holy, but it also means to set aside. So one of the things that was reflected in the things you said, it's really different than the other 6. It is set apart. And there is a statement in Torah where it says, Vayina fash, God, Vayina fashed. God ensouled God's self on the 7th day. Somehow the soul is part of the 7th day. In a way, the 6 days of working and doing are demanding. There's a statement that comes out of Eastern European Jewry that says, it's schwer to be a Yid. It's hard to be Jewish. Now, there are all kinds of demands and commandments and expectations, clearly. But, Jews worked hard, especially in Eastern Europe, in Russia, in Poland. They worked really hard. And then when Shabbat came, it was this gift that was totally set apart. So the whole concept of Shabbat begins right here. And then we come to the desert, right? For you have brought us out into the wilderness to starve this whole congregation to death. This is the response of the Israelites. They come into the desert and they immediately kvetch and complain. It's really quite astounding because they have these fantasies they carry with them that somehow life in Egypt was a celebration. They got meat, they got treated well, and they come to this wilderness. So what happens? So God says to Moses, I will rain down bread for you from the sky, and the people shall go out and gather each day that day's portion. They could only take for that day, that I may thus test them to see whether they will follow my instructions or not. So one of the first things that happens is that God actually nourishes them and treats them to all this, what we call manna. But then it says, now this is much before Yitro. This is in Exodus 16. On the sixth day, when they apportion what they have brought in, it shall prove to be double the amount that they gather each day. So along with getting the gift of manna, they don't have to work. They just have to go out and gather what they need. On Fridays, the sixth day, they get extra. Why? Because the next day is Shabbat. It's not even the 10 Commandments yet. And in Exodus 16, it says, mark that it is. God is telling them to mark this day, having given you the Sabbath. So the concept of Shabbat is already set into the people's minds. Their understanding, it's all based around the food. Every day you'll get what you need, and on Friday you'll get a double portion. Therefore, God will give you 2 days food on the 6th. Let everyone remain in their place. Let no one leave the vicinity on the 7th day. So they're told not to go out and go search for food. What's so interesting is people really are not in touch with the fact that even before the 10 Commandments, because we're commanded, right, to honor this day, God has already set it up after they've left Egypt. This is kind of the first piece about changing their mentality of being a slave. And it all centers around receiving food as a gift and not having to go look for it on the Sabbath. And just hold your question, Eric, just for a moment. So let me just share one more thing and then we'll come back. So I'll tell you what, we'll stop here. And Eric, you wanted to make a comment, please. Unmute.
I didn't have my car in Florida for a couple of days and I needed food. So I had the driver take me to Costco and stock up for my food. So I didn't have to go pay him another $50 just for one day's car. So I was stocking up on food. I fill my freezer, I weigh it out and everything like that. And I have enough food for many days, so I don't have to go to Costco a million times. So I may have, it's like a little, I can't, what I'm driving at, I can't even express it properly, but I was making sure that I had enough food in my freezer for at least 6 weeks, so I don't have to go to Costco.
Well, see, the Torah already taught you, teaches us to be prepared, right? Shabbat is the day that we honor. And so make sure you have what you need by Friday, so you don't have to get in your car, you don't have to think about what's missing. But the Torah, which people miss, is that the whole concept of Shabbat is introduced early. In Yitro, which is today's portion, we have the 10 Commandments, and everybody thinks, that's when we're told about Shabbat. But what happens is people often miss that the whole concept of Shabbat begins immediately after leaving Egypt. In Egypt, we leave on just after, at the time of the Passover Seder. But once they get into the desert, God has already prepped them that their life is going to be different. It's already going to be different. You're going to have a day where you don't have to worry about food because you're going to have it on Friday. You don't have to leave. You don't have to run. You don't have to go anywhere. You get to just relax. And it happens at a point when we don't think about it. We don't realize that one of the first things, it's one of the 10 Commandments. It's one of the 10. But it's one of the first things, it's a high priority for God that these people with a slave mentality get out of a slave mentality. You know, most of you are in a different place in your life. When you think about your children or grandchildren, they're in a place of being very absorbed and sometimes even enslaved to obligations, responsibilities. Let me just let that person in. We live a life for a period, you know, in our development when sometimes it almost feels like being a slave to our work, to the bills, to taking care of and being responsible for other people. And I'm assuming that most of you are kind of past that, in a different kind of phase of your life. And the people who come out of Egypt still have a very slave mentality. And the first thing that God wants to introduce to them is what? Shabbat. And God does it through the food. What's really interesting is that for 6 days, they're told they can only get the food they need. If you take any more than you need, it's going to go bad. Yes, we are all equal. Yes, Eric, that's true. But the idea that Shabbat is like a time frame in which God is trying to develop a mentality amongst the people about their life, that their lives value and matter. But also not to be too greedy. They immediately are faced with a reality. They can only take as much as they can consume in one day. And according to some of the commentary by the rabbis, everybody kind of had different needs. You know, I might be able to eat a little less than one of you, or maybe a little more, but you only ate what you could handle. But what's fascinating is that on Friday, on the 6th day, they're told to take a double portion. That means there's going to be extra for the next day, correct? How come that doesn't get spoiled? How come that doesn't get spoiled? For the 5 days in which they're getting food, they can't take too much because it tells us that it's going to go bad. So don't be greedy. Don't try to take extra. It's going to spoil. And yet on Friday, on the 6th day, if they get extra, it's not. Anybody have any thoughts about that? I think it's fascinating that on Friday, the food is going to stay really okay for Saturday, for Shabbos. Howard, yeah. Unmute. I'll remind you, you got to unmute.
In Marxism, there's the concept of only to each according to their needs and from each according to their abilities. So to each according to their needs. So what you're doing is you're looking in the Torah and cherry picking and finding, it seems to me, a way to kind of come up with this lesson that you want to come up with. But is this really in Judaism?
Well, in Torah, it says, take what you're going to need for the day. So when you talk about Marxism, which is centuries later, it's very surprising how much of the, what do I want to say, the Torah wisdom gets infused throughout centuries and centuries. It influences the courts, it influences mentality. Many of the Marxists probably had Jewish history and studied Torah.
King Solomon had 1,000 wives. So
yes.
Was that taking just what he needed?
Well, you know, he was critiqued for that. You know, just because the people that we have great respect for do wrong things, we don't call them out. Yeah, he certainly didn't need 1,000 wives, and I don't think he was very well respected for that choice. But you know, personalities in Torah are far from perfect. That's one of the things we do know. We learn lessons by some of their failings and their flaws, but there isn't one person truly that we learn about that's perfect. Nobody's perfect. I mean, Joseph comes to his tzaddik. He's called a tzaddik, and as a teenager, he was arrogant and he teased his brothers and felt superior at times. But we forgive him because he becomes aware of his flaws and his foibles. So, yeah, that's all I can say about that. It's not okay, but there are things that we do learn. And it's right here in this beginning portion around Shabbat and the food, only take what you need. But we're in a culture that's beyond Torah. We live in a culture that's beyond Torah. And we are in a culture, especially politically, of incredible greed.
Well, another way to interpret this double portion was simply that you should not work on Shabbat.
Absolutely.
It doesn't say take what you need. It just says don't work on Shabbat.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Since the manna was perishable, people normally wouldn't take more than a day's supply, because normally it wouldn't last very long.
Well, that's the whole point. That's what I'm pointing out to you, that this opportunity of God feeding the slaves, the freed slaves, was an opportunity to teach, you know what, you're no longer enslaved. You don't have to work 7 days a week. You get a day to stay home, and what you need to nourish you is provided for you. So that's why I wanted to point this out. This is long before Yitro and the 10 Commandments, which is what I was going to talk about next. Anybody else? Suzanne, did you want to say something?
Yes, going back to one of your original questions, how is it that the food didn't spoil since it was for 2 days, if I understood you
Yes.
correctly?
Yes.
My feelings about that are that this whole concept of getting food every day from God and then getting the extra portion on Friday, I feel the whole thing is a miracle, just a total miracle that God is providing the former slaves with a day to rest and not having to worry about the food. And somehow into my head has come that God knew what would spoil and what wouldn't spoil. And therefore, God sent down, or across, or wherever God sent his food from, was not spoilable. The food that God sent on Friday. For me, that's I can grasp that. It's just another beautiful miracle.
Well, you're absolutely right. And that's what God says. And Moshe reminds the people later, in Torah. Were you not aware? Were you not present for God's miracles? The manna was miraculous food. It was miraculous caregiving, right? God was like the first caregiver. I don't know if any of you have had that role and know what that's like. It's very challenging, it can be demanding. It's also a gift to be able to help somebody you love or someone in need. And God is like the first caregiver, but it was miraculous. So let me go back to a couple more images. And if you don't mind muting, only because we're getting a little bit of background noise. So then we come to this portion. And in this portion, it is definitely now part of the 10 Commandments, because God says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat likadsho. Again, this concept of holiness. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. It's an important idea of how this day is somehow set apart, because kadosh, as I said, means actually to set apart. I mean, what is holiness? When you think about holiness, what gives something a sense of being sanctified, it's certainly separated from the mundane, from the ordinary. It has a uniqueness and a specialness. But literally, when you translate that word, it means to set it apart and make it separate and make it different. You know, Jews have many, many, many ways of honoring Shabbos, celebrating it, doing it. For some, it begins, as I said, it's a 24-hour experience, and they spend probably at least 24 hours ahead of time preparing, right? The shopping, the cooking, the cleaning, polishing the silver. There's all these things that some people do in order to honor this day. They have special meals, they cook things that they don't during the week. They go to temple, they study, they take a rest, they see people they love. Not all of us can fulfill a Shabbat that way. We all have to find a way to create what this day is. It's to be set apart and different from the other 6, whether it means to turn off the news, turn off the TV, sit and read a book, go out in nature, be with family. There's so many ways really of finding a way to honor, but making sure that the day is different, as you all do by coming to Torah study. That already creates something different. So it says in this portion in Yitro, 6 days you'll labor, right? And do all your work. But on the 7th day, it is a Sabbath of your God. So what's interesting is we're reminded this is not just a Sabbath for you. When we engage in Shabbat, we are honoring God, because the commandment says it is a Sabbath for God. V'yom hashvi'i Shabbat ladonai Elohecha. This 7th day is a Shabbat to Adonai, your God. So it's very interesting that one of the ways we connect with the Holy One is just by setting aside the 7th day and not doing what we do. And it says in the portion this week in Yitro, this is not just for you, your children, your son, your daughter, your slaves, anybody that works for you, even your cattle, you don't work them, or the stranger who's within your settlements. I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? That everybody that is connected to you, your children, the people who work with you, these were people who were farmers and in the fields. So their animals got a break too. But what I want to point out is this language that it is a Shabbat for God. So what the rabbis teach us, that Shabbat is a taste of the world to come. We have this moment of which we feel almost like it's a paradise. We'll be out of the world of pain and suffering and responsibility and burdensome. It's a time that's set aside that is so beautiful. It feels like the world to come. We're also told Zachor v'Shamor. Zachor means remember. Shamor means to guard. Remember and guard Shabbat. So when you think about that, let me just stop there for a moment and stop sharing. What does that mean? For some people, the idea of the 2 candles represents the Shamor, the Zachor. If people, if a rabbi is asked, why are there 2 candles, Rabbi? Usually the standard answer is one for Shamor, a Zachor, and Shamor. What does that mean for you? That Shabbat is something you remember and something that you guard, take care of. Do you have any feelings about what that means for you? Yeah, Rebecca.
I love that concept. So thank you for presenting that the two candlesticks represent Sachor and Shamor. To guard it, going back to the second portion of the mana,
Yeah.
it reminds me that mana, kind of building on what Susie said, that mana was truly a miracle. At the same time, the Israelites had to guard it to keep it from spoiling. And so that kind of feeds into
Oh,
new
interesting.
concept.
I love that. Rebecca, thank you.
Mhm.
The idea that they needed to guard what they were given, this gift, and take care of it. That's a beautiful idea. Yeah, Suzanne.
It feels like it's a challenge
Uh-huh.
for our lives in 2025.
Yep.
A challenge to be able to set aside what we all consider our challenging lives, to be able to set it aside and say, I don't know, I feel like the comparison of the former slaves being asked by God to set the Sabbath aside. I might be so out of line. I compare it to our lives. I feel that we have so many obstacles: social media, our family, traffic, blah, 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 blah. They had their cows and their
Yeah.
families.
A simpler life from our perspective. Yeah.
They had, yes, I feel that we have to work hard, work really hard to keep this challenge uh, alive in our lives.
You know what? You're absolutely right. It's not an easy thing to do. It is a challenge. We've become truly, so many people have become very addicted to their phones, their technology, the news, what's going on in the world. It's like this bubble we live in, and it's very hard to get out of. There's no question. The gift is that if you do it, the difference in your life is just tremendous. I see Mara and Harv have a hand up. Can you please? Yes.
What strikes me is that we're told that 6 days God labored and then rested, and we're asked to do the same. And it reminds us that we are B'Tselem, in the image of God, that we have the potential to be like God. So if you look at remember and guard, we are to remember that we have the potential to be like God, and we are commanded to remember that and to behave in that way.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's beautiful. It is really what the commentators, the rabbis try to teach us, by emulating the Holy One, and remembering that God did this, we need to do it. It connects us to our source of which we come from. So thank you. Thank you for saying that. Let me jump back. I have a few more images I want to share with you, and ideas following what we've just done. I'm so glad that you found this really meaningful, this whole concept. Let's see. So here's another concept I want to share with you about the candlesticks. And actually, I have to give my husband credit for this. He always talks about the candles. That's Rabbi Steve Robbins, that they're a gateway. So we know that for many people, it's Shamor v'Zachor, Zachor v'Shamor. But if you look at it as a gateway, what you're doing is coming from one time frame to another time frame. And there is this beautiful concept of Heschel's that Shabbat is this time. It's not about space, it's about time, that the time changes. And it's a palace in time. That's Heschel's description. It's a palace in time. And when we light the candles, you know, we close our eyes and then we open them, and then all of a sudden everything feels different and looks different. And one of the ways we do Shabbat is, you know, there are 3 waves over the candles. That's the convention, the traditional movement is 3 waves of the candles. And there's always questions about why 3? Well, one of the ways we interpret is that every wave represents part of us and that we come to Shabbat for healing. So we heal the body, we heal the mind, and we heal the spirit. And it is another way to think about when you light candles and you enter Shabbat, that you are coming to heal all that has happened to you for 6 days, the outpouring of energy, the thinking, the anxiety, the stress, the demands. So this image, if you can hold this image and think about Shabbat, and the candles are a gateway. The other thing that we learn in our tradition is that we actually receive a gift. When we engage in Shabbat, we receive something called a neshama yitera, an extra soul. That's what it's called. Something happens to us and we feel actually uplifted and different. And this is just an image, obviously, of somebody doing yoga, but there's so many things that one can do either in nature or in their home where they just feel themselves uplifted. This is an image by Michael Muchnick, who does beautiful art. But remember, I said at the beginning that the rabbis describe Shabbat as a taste of the world to come. And this is his image of what that is. It's interesting because it's a ring. And in some ways, when we become connected to the Holy One, it's as if we become partners. And this is one of his pieces of art as well. And this is the Shabbat table. It's this wonderful image, right, of the kids, the family, the whole family. They're all sitting there ready to have this delicious meal. And we try to think about the food for Shabbos as being on a different level of what we eat for 6 days. And this is just an image of the Shabbat lunch table that not all of us will have, but maybe we need to work towards having, you know, the kind of foods that we don't treat ourselves with during the week. And Shabbat is supposed to also be a time of gratitude, and that we have this gift, that we have an opportunity to do what we're talking about, which is to release ourselves like the slaves did from being engaged, being connected, as complicated as it is in this day and age. It's an opportunity to replenish so that you can continue with the next 6 days. And this is just an image that you will keep in perfect peace, and your mind will be at peace. And this is actually a statement from the text. I think it's from Psalms. You will keep God in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because God trusts in you. So I just wanted to share this for a moment, to just sit with this image of calm and beauty. The water, the gift of water, and how peaceful this is. Even if you sit and you can't go out, we have been given the opportunity of so much beauty and richness through art and through these images to just sit and receive what this has to offer. Because not all of us have a forest that we can walk through. We can imagine it, we can meditate on it. So I wanted to give this to you just for a moment, to sit in this peaceful environment and let all the stresses, strains, anxieties that you live with dissipate and let them go. This is the gift of Shabbat. There something you'd like to share, or how you feeling right now? Yeah, Rebecca.
I sleep fitfully, and always after Friday night service, I always sleep better.
Mm. Yeah, prayer and music, the gift of a Shabbat service can totally change your temperament, right? It just totally, there is, we have to remember that everything sort of happens where in our brains. And all the research shows that spirituality of whatever sort it is for you, shifts your brain. I think that's really important for you to understand. Your brain shifts. The hormones that are released change in prayer, in beautiful melody, in moments of meditation, sitting with an image that I just shared with you of nature and peace and running water. Yes, Eric. Oh, you have to unmute. Sorry.
I'm a solo ager. My family is almost gone, except for a few cousins, and this is an opportunity to be with people because I am very reluctant to approach people with my problems and everything. And it's an opportunity to be with people, even though I don't know them, but I feel comfortable being in this setting that I have an opportunity to meet with other people throughout the universe. So we actually refresh each other on Shabbat, and these Torah classes are my therapy, which prevents me from going off the reservation.
Yes, I'm really glad you have that. Being social and having other people in your life saves you. It saves all of us. There was a book that came out two years ago by the Surgeon General. Murty is his name. And he said the number one killer is loneliness, being isolated. Now, being alone sometimes is a wonderful gift, but that's different from being lonely. And so being social and connecting this way in classes or Zoom or however you do it, it will save your life. And thank you.
You bet.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was always a caregiver to my family. Then it's time for me to get care. It's my turn because I took care of all my family in something, and this is the members of the class are my caregivers
That's
because
wonderful.
because I have anxiety and depression. I after I've dealt with my family getting sick and everything, and this is my time to be refreshed. Just by meeting with you, Eva, is like it's like taking a spoonful of sugar.
Well, sugar's not so good for you.
No, I stole it from Mary Poppins.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We are angels to each other. That's the way I like to describe it. We are all angels for each other. We all have a purpose in the world, and we are here, to receive and to give. And that's the gift that the community has, and that the synagogue has so many multiple ways to make that possible for all of you is an incredible gift. And I thank you because it enriches my life to share with you. So we've come really to the end. I want to take the moment before we do Kaddish, because it is a very big community. There are always so many names, and it's always hard and painful, but we want to honor them on this day. If you will just be patient with me, I have quite a list of those who passed during the past month: Robert Brand, George Nagler, Jerry Felsenthal, Louis Joseph Hassan, Sila Horn, Stan Inkelis, Daniel Elkin Levin, Donald Lowe's, Norman Malin, Herbert Rettinger, Adrian Rosenbaum Jacobson, Arlene Salkin, Hal Slan, Ruth Stotch, Bradley Eric Sugar, Philip Sunshine, and Diane Tome. So now we have your sites. There are lots of people to remember. And again, I just ask for your patience. Anne Abrams, Fen Abrams, Norman Abrams, Camille Adar, Theodore Arnovitz, Nasser Banayan, Talabanian, Jean Burrell-Fain, Mary Berman, Arnold Bernstein, Rose Bernstein, Homayun Bina, Evelyn Black, Fanny Blatt, Mildred Borstein, Estelle Bravman, Virginia Bulakian, Gerald Chaskis, Michael Cofield, Abe Cohen, Al Cohen, Jacques de Arline, Sandy Davids, Robert DeRuy, Michael Ellis, Joan Fetter, Douglas Feld, Charles Fenton, Floyd Sidney Fearman, Robin Fisher, Herbert Frankel, and Marvin Frankel, Clara Fraser, Leonore First, Daniel Gam, Albert Garber, Bessie Ginsberg, B. Rita Gittleson, Donald Glabman, Jean Glass, Betty Glucken, Bertha Ratenoff Gallant, Hugh Gottfried, Willard Hackerman, John Harris, James Hartnett, Daniel Heisler, Alan Harvey, Suzanne Hirschhorn, Lola Lee Jameson, Max Kamens, Mary Kay, Leon Kent, Ernest Klein, Irene Klein, Kenneth Krasnow, Alfred Kuczynski, Flora Kut, Shirley Landsman, Eva Lane, Monty Albert Lauder, Adrian Lee, Klaus Lefferber, Edna Levine and Ronald Levine, Sherry L. Brown Levine, Dottie Levinson, Corey Levy and Marco Levy, William Helmut Lippman, Ann Loeb, and Mandel, Molly Mann, Lois Melvoin, Gloria Merrill, Edith Miller, Noreen Nelson, Paige Newman.
Question mark.
I think somebody needs to, I don't know who it is, should mute. Noreen Nelson, Taji Newman, Addison Oleon, Mary Orland, Daniela Ortiz Fivash, Andrea Lynn Pennington, Leslie Perloff, Louis Peters, Abe Holger, Sally Rolston, Mary Rosemont, Melba Ruth, Rudy Solomons, Avi Gross Schaefer, Sue Schneider, Betty Schulman, Leonard Schwad, Mildred Seidenberg, Jack Sandowski, Carol Sherman, Jean Scheinfeld, Nelson Schrager, Alexander Smirlig, Art Sobin, Miriam Spertus, Gail Spiegel, Albert Spound, Norman Stern, Janet Kaminsky Sunshine, Ida Tenenbaum, Sarah Tischerman, Jess Uslin, Myron Varone, Alan Kuzak Weinberger, Jamie White, William Zinberg, and Dorothy Zucker. We acknowledge all of those who have been defending the state of Israel. And then there are so many, right, who do not know people in the world to say Kaddish for them. It is a very, very sad reality, isn't it, when we just find, just trying to find the Kaddish for us so that we can say it. So just give me one moment. I wanna have it in front of us. Let me find it so you can see it. I'm going to share the Kaddish so you can see it. And you're welcome to join me. It's right here in front of you. And there may be people in your lives from the past that you can think of at this moment as well. Yit gadol, yikadash, shemei rabah, bi'alma, divarach, yerutei, bi'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon, uvyomechon, uvchayei, B'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala, u'vizman, kari, ve'emru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Ba Mivarach Leolam Umah Yidbarach V'yishtabach V'yipa'ar V'yitroman V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei Kedusha Rihu Le'ela Kol Shechata V'shirata Tushpota V'nechemata Da Biram Bialma Bimru Amen. Yehei Shama Rabami Shamaya Chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Bimru Amen. Osei Shalom Bimromav Huyase Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Bimru
Amen.
Amen. A prayer for the captives. Strengthen their spirit and bring them our prayers that they be protected from all harm. Implant understanding in the heart of the enemy, that they may return the captives in wholeness of body and spirit. Grant wisdom to the Israel Defense Forces and strength, of course, that they may secure freedom for the captives without loss of life. Grant strength of spirit and courage of heart to all sons and daughters of Abraham and Sarah to release the bonds of captivity and allow us all to live in freedom. They shall call me and I will answer them. I will be with them in distress. I will rescue them and honor them. Psalm 91:15. And let us all say amen.
Amen.
And I wish you all an amazing rest of your Shabbos, to find whatever you can to connect with the Holy One and your soul, and to be removed and released from everything that's going on around you, but to be in the center of the beauty of the palace of time.
Thank you. Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom. See you next week.
Helen Schmerling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.